Hello, I'm Shahid Hussein, and welcome. We're diving into a really fundamental question in any project. How do you prove you're actually making a difference? Together, we're going to break down the essential tools for doing exactly that, the different types of indicators used in monitoring and evaluation. All right, let's just jump right into the big one, the question that every single person involved in a project wants to know. How do you prove that it actually works? It's just not enough to feel like you're doing good things. You have to be able to measure it. And that, right there, is the whole job of an indicator.
So what are they, really? Think of indicators like signposts on a road trip. They're the specific, observable, and measurable signs that tell you if you're on the right track and how far you've come. Basically, they provide the hard evidence that turns a hopeful guess, yeah, I think this is working, into a proven fact. So here's our game plan for today. First, we're going to talk about what success even looks like. Then, we'll follow a project's whole journey, starting with its foundation, the inputs and processes, and moving all the way to the results chain. That's your outputs, outcomes, and impact. And finally, we'll wrap up by looking at how to pick the right indicators to see the full picture. Now, to make all this feel real and not just like some abstract theory, we're going to follow the journey of one single project from start to finish. Let's imagine for a minute that we're running a community literacy program. Using this example will really help us see how each type of indicator has its own unique and super important role to play. Every single project, and that includes our literacy program, has to start with a solid foundation. This is all about what you put in and what you do. And these are measured by two key types of indicators, your input indicators and your process indicators. Let's break them down. First up, we've got input indicators. And honestly, the name says it all, right? These measure everything you put into the project to get it off the ground. We're talking money, people, supplies, you name it. You can think of it as the basic accounting for your project. It answers the question, are we actually using the resources we were given? So for our community literacy program, what would this look like? Well, our input indicators would be tracking things like the total budget we have to work with, the exact number of teachers we've hired, how many books we've actually bought, and of course, the time, the hours that our staff and volunteers are putting in. This tells us if we even have the fuel to get where we want to go. Next, we have process indicators. Okay, so if inputs are the fuel you put in the car, process indicators are what measure if the engine is running smoothly. They look past what we have and focus on how we're actually doing things. Are we sticking to the plan? And this is so crucial because it lets you spot problems early and fix them while the project is still going on. Back to our literacy program, a process indicator would be tracking whether teachers are actually following the curriculum we all agreed on. Or we might send out surveys to see how students feel about the quality of the teaching. We'd also be watching to see if classes are starting and ending on time. See, these indicators make sure our project isn't just running, but that it's running well. Okay, so we've put our resources in, our activities are chugging along nicely, but so what? What is all of that effort actually producing? This brings us to the real heart of M&E, the results chain. This is a sequence of 3 critical levels: outputs, outcomes, and impact. This table gives us a fantastic snapshot. The first thing to notice is the time frame. Outputs, that's the stuff that happens right away, the immediate products of our work. Then you have outcomes. These are the changes we start to see in people's knowledge or skills, kind of in the midterm. And finally, you have impact. That's the big picture, long-term, lasting change we're hoping for. Okay, I really want you to lean in for this one because the difference between outputs and outcomes is probably the single most important and, the most commonly confused idea for anyone new to M&E. Here's the key. Outputs tell you what was done. They measure your activities. Outcomes tell you what changed as a result. They measure the consequences. It's the difference between being busy and actually being effective. Let's make this crystal clear with our literacy program. An output is, we gave out 500 books and 100 students finished the course. That's great, but it doesn't tell us if anyone can actually read any better. The outcome tells us that 75% of our students improved their reading level. That's the change. And the long-term impact, maybe 5 years from now, we can measure a 10% increase in the whole community's literacy rate. So now we know the different types of indicators, but that leads to the next big question, doesn't it? How in the world do you choose good ones? Because believe me, the quality of your entire M&E system hinges on the quality of the indicators you pick. It is not about tracking everything you can think of. It's about tracking the right things. Choosing your indicators isn't just guesswork. It's a really deliberate process. First, and this is non-negotiable, It all starts with having crystal clear goals. If you don't know where you're going, how can you measure progress? Second, you map out your indicators across that whole project journey we just talked about. And finally, you have to give them a reality check. You got to ask, is this relevant? Can we actually get this data? Is this something we can truly measure?
And look, I really can't stress this enough. The absolute foundation for this entire process, for everything we're talking about, is setting SMART goals. If your goal is vague, something like improve literacy, it's basically impossible to measure. Good indicators can only be built on the solid bedrock of well-defined goals.
So what makes a goal SMART? Well, it needs to be specific. No fuzzy wishes. Measurable, so you know for a fact when you've hit it. Achievable, something you can actually pull off. Relevant, it has to actually matter for your project's main mission. And time-bound, you gotta have a deadline. Just compare improve literacy to a SMART goal like increase the reading proficiency of 75 students from grade 2 to grade 3 within one school year. You see how much easier that is to measure? Your indicators practically write themselves. Wow, okay, we've covered a ton of ground here, from the resources you put in at the very beginning to the long-term impact you're hoping to create. So let's boil all of this down to the most important takeaway. If you remember just one thing from our time together, please let it be this quote right here. Outputs tell you about your effort. Outcomes tell you about the effect on people. And impact, well, impact tells you about the lasting legacy of your work. So here's the bottom line. No single indicator can ever tell the whole story. If you only have a report on your outputs, we held 20 workshops, you're telling a story about being busy, not a story about creating change. You absolutely need a balanced mix of input, process, output, outcome, and eventually impact indicators to truly get it, to really understand your program's performance and prove its worth. So I'll leave you with this one question to think about for your own projects. What story are your indicators going to tell? Will it just be a simple list of things you did? Or will it be a powerful story of meaningful, real, and lasting change?